morning, and welcome to the Africa Weekly Talk. Today's subject on the docket: America is the world, and the world is America. And America's new sheriff in town, Donald J. Trump, didn't hesitate to say it and make it loudly and clearly to the world that there's a new sheriff in town. And there's also a new world order. The realignment of America's domestic, foreign, economic policy, and how this is going to shape the geopolitics of the world in the coming future. But fellows, before I dive into this subject today, let's go ahead and hear U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio in an audio interview that he did whilst on a visit to Latin America, Central America, and in El Salvador. And I'll come back and dissect this whole new world order and how it's also going to affect Africa, Europe, Asia, and the rest of the world. So let's go ahead and hear what Marco Rubio has to say about this new world order, and I'll come back and dissect this whole thing. Yes, I mean, Donald Trump is proving to the world that there's a
So you're now the head of USAID. The head of Doge, Elon Musk, called USAID a criminal organization and added that it is time for it to die. Do you agree with that?
Let me walk you through the history of this agency, because I've dealt with it for 14 years in the United States Senate. It was created as a way of doing humanitarian assistance in the world, separate from the State Department at the time. But it said you have to take policy direction from the Secretary of State, the National Security Council, the White House, and all elements of government. They have basically evolved into an agency that believes that they're not even a U.S. government agency, that they are a global charity, that they take the taxpayer money and they spend it as a global charity, irrespective of whether it is in the national interest or not in the national interest. One of the most common complaints you will get if you go to embassies around the world from State Department officials and ambassadors and the like is USAID is not only not cooperative, they undermine the work that we're doing in that country. They are supporting programs that upset the host government for whom we're trying to work with on a broader scale and so forth. So they're completely unresponsive. They just don't consider that they work for the U.S. They just think they're a global entity and that their master is the globe and not the United States. And that's not what the statute says, and that's not sustainable. The President put a pause on all foreign aid. We found a lot of cooperation in the State Department. And we have issued dozens and dozens of waivers. As we go through all the foreign aid programs in the Department of State, the ones that make sense, we issue a waiver. They go back on. We've already done it for dozens of programs.
And you'll be issuing more waivers?
And we'll be doing so. For example, we did it today for some of the the migrant flights that are going out of Panama. It's in our national interest to help them deport people that are headed towards the United States back to their home countries. And we'll issue some here today in El Salvador because they do a lot of cooperation with us on stopping drugs and stopping migration and so forth. So we're going through it at the State Department portion of foreign aid. We find cooperation. State Department people have been great, and we're issuing waivers and we're getting input, and it's working. We go to USAID, which is a big chunk of foreign aid, $40 billion or so. They're completely uncooperative. They won't tell you what the programs are. They refuse to answer questions. They try to push through payments. Even after the executive order, they were still trying to push money through the system.
Can it be reformed, or does it need to die?
Well, that was always the goal, was to reform it. But now we have rank insubordination. Now we have basically an active effort where their basic attitude is, we don't work for anyone. We work for ourselves. No agency of government can tell us what to do. So the president made me the acting administrator. I've delegated that power to someone who's there full time, and we're going to go through the same process at USAID as we're going through now at the State Department. I think there are this is not about getting rid of foreign aid. There are things that we do through USAID that we should continue to do. That makes sense. And we'll have to decide, is that better through the State Department, or is that better through something, reformed USAID? That's the process we're working through. There are things that are happening at USAID that we should not be involved in funding, or that we have a lot of questions about. But they're completely uncooperative. So we had no choice but to take dramatic steps to bring this thing under control.
So it could exist in the future, USAID.
Well, the aid, I think it's important to separate USAID from aid programs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because everybody's acting like somehow these aid programs are impossible without an agency.
Process oriented. I mean, do you think that we'll still be the most generous nation on earth? at the end of this process?
I think we'll be the most generous nation on earth, but we'll think we're going to be the most generous nation on earth in a way that makes sense, that's in our national interest. We are going to fund programs that make America stronger or safer or more prosperous. We're going to pay for things that make sense for the United States. The United States government is not a charity. It is not a global charity. There are a lot of global charities, and they should go to if you want to be involved in global charities, go join a global charity, raise private money, and spend it on whatever you want. But this is taxpayer money. It's not my money. It's not their money. It's our money. It's taxpayer money. And we have an obligation, if we're going to do foreign aid, to do it in a way that makes sense, that doesn't support our enemies, and that actually is aligned with, makes sense within the context of our foreign policy. And the people at USAID, at the top levels especially, have been completely uncooperative. They don't view themselves that way. They're insubordinate. They refuse to provide access. They refuse to provide information. Not now. They don't provide access to Congress. Go to members of the Senate who have tried to get answers from USAID, and they tell them, we're not going to tell you anything. We don't work for you. We don't work for state. We don't work for the president. We don't even work for America. We work for ourselves. That's not going to continue.
Do you get the sense that during this pause, or are you concerned during this aid pause, that China could come in and fill the vacuum with their influence operations?
No. I mean, first of all, they don't do that now. If they did, they'd be out there competing with us in these places. But my point is this. Even if they did that, why would we fund things that are against our national interest or don't further our national interest, whether China's there or not? If China wants to waste their money on something that's against their national interest, go ahead and do it. We're not going to do it. It makes no sense for us to be involved in things that undermine what is important to America or that don't further what is important to America. And irrespective of what China decides to do, this is taxpayer money. We shouldn't be spending it on programs that have nothing to do with the United States and nothing to do with making America stronger, safer, and more prosperous. We have a foreign policy, and everything we do, including spending money, has to be aligned with that, has to further our national interests.
Moving on to some of the tariffs now. You're heading up negotiations with Mexico. The president just announced that now. Do these tariffs, especially those against Canada, fundamentally change the relationship that the United States has with our most immediate neighbors?
Well, it changes our economic relationship. The president's point is that trade with Canada is very unfair. You know, that he'll tell you, and he said it repeatedly, U.S. banks can't operate there. There's all kinds of industries that they protect against and do not allow to enter the country. So he views this trade imbalance as it's unfair and needs to be reset. He also argues they have been less than cooperative on fentanyl and on the inflow of fentanyl. The Canadians will tell you that more fentanyl goes that way than the other way, but increasingly, in October of last year, they found a big fentanyl lab inside of Canada, and he doesn't feel like we're getting enough cooperation, and so that's why he's imposed those tariffs. In the case of Mexico, the president's point is much of the northern region of Mexico, sadly, and in direct threat to the Mexican government, is controlled by cartels. And so they've announced they're going to deploy 10,000 National Guard troops, Mexican National Guard troops, to their border, their northern border, and the president's decided to delay tariffs.
This is a good way of doing business in New World Order.
Well, I think the president's point is America's been taken advantage of for far too long. And I think that's true across the board. That's been true on foreign aid. We have countries and places that we pour a bunch of money into, and then they vote against us at the UN every time. They support all of our enemies. And you start asking yourself, why do we keep putting money into this? Our embassies say it. And the USAID says, we don't care. We're going to keep doing it anyways. In other cases, when it comes to trade, there are countries around the world where their companies can do whatever they want in America. They can do anything they want in America, but we can't do it over there. So there's this process called reciprocity, equal. Whatever you charge us, we get to charge you. Whatever you allow us to do, you're allowed to do. Whatever you block, we're going to block. And I think the president's a big believer in reciprocity, in evenness, in fairness. For some reason, I don't know how this happened, but over the last 20 or 30 years, we felt like it's okay for countries to take advantage of us. And that's just not going to continue under President Trump.
Okay. Mr. Secretary, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, fellows. So you just heard the Secretary of Marco Rubio, Foreign Secretary Marco Rubio, talking about the New World Order, America's New World Order policies. And this New World Order policies, which involves a lot of aid money to various countries and various programs around the world, all is going to change. And this is going to have a lot of repercussions across various countries, continents all over the world. Because at the end of the day, if you look at the tariffs policy and immigration policy that is going on right now, citizens of other countries that live in the United States that work here and remit billions of dollars to their various countries are all going to be affected. Because you're talking about countries like China, where remittances from Chinese living in the United States alone account for about $40 billion. India, which is the biggest of it all, remits about almost $100 billion to India from the United States. Same with Mexico. Mexico about $68 to $70 billion. And our own fellow Nigeria also remits about $20-25 billion a year to Nigeria from the United States of America. So looking at all these factors with regards to these deportations and tariffs and these policies that is coming out from the Trump administration, that has also reverberated seriously all around world capitals. Now, countries of the world now have decided to find new solutions to their problems in terms of the aid that they receive from United States and even some through USA as well as United Nations and world organizations. So, fellas, I mean, this is a big deal. This is a big deal, and Donald J. Trump is making the world know the importance of America's money to the world. And I don't fault Donald J. Trump when it comes to some of these programs. Yes, of course, there are some of these programs that are being abused and have been abused for quite too long. And there have to be a way to streamline these programs to make sure that these programs go to benefit the people who really need these benefits. But unfortunately, there's a lot of fraud and corruption in some of these organizations. US aid gives money to various organizations around the world, like the Secretary of State just said. And some of this money goes to things that basically don't even benefit the citizens of these various countries. And that is what they are trying to look into. Streamline everything, mark them as line item to make sure that the money that is coming from American taxpayers go to do the things that goes to benefit citizens of these countries that need them. But not through some programs that basically is just to align with political and interest of the agency. I mean, US aid receives about 40 to 60 billion US dollars from the US government. And all this money goes out to help programs all across the world. I mean, we are not talking about even the United Nations program, which is contributed separately by the United States government. The United States alone contributes about 25% of UN's budget. The United States alone contributes over 50% of all aid that goes around the world. That is a fact. And this is how much great America has been doing to the world. So this issue of the New World Order, realignment of America's socioeconomic and foreign policy and domestic policy to the world is a big deal. It's a big deal. No wonder the rest of the world have taken it very seriously. Because now a lot of countries around the world now are making decisions based on what they are expecting coming out of the Trump administration's policies. I mean, now you have Trump withdrawing from World Health Organization, the Paris Climate Agreement. He's already withdrawn from that. And now also looking at US aid. So now all these countries around the world have to look at themselves and ask themselves, what can they do? What can they do in order to be able to help their citizens without this money if this money doesn't show up? But I still strongly believe that America is still going to contribute to a lot of health programs and so on around the world. By the end of the day, what they are going to do now is to make sure that this money that goes through US aid and the United Nations and World Health Organization, all these programs that America funds, are going to go to the right causes and the people that really need them. I mean, going back about 20 years ago, George Bush gave over billions and billions and billions of dollars to help keep down the AIDS epidemic that was destroying South Africa and some parts of Africa at that time. And that aid that was given to South Africa and the rest of the world to combat AIDS saved millions and millions of people's lives. So these programs does real good to the world. But at the end of the day, also, there have also been a lot of corrupt and fraudulent deals within these agencies. And that is what the current administration is trying to weed out. Weed out all this corrupt and fraud that exists in these massive organizations. Some of these organizations have people who basically take about $1 that's supposed to go to benefit citizens, and they take about 80 cents out of the dollar as administrative cost. So basically, only 20 cents of a dollar goes to help these people that need the money. 80 cents of a dollar goes as administrative costs. That's what most of these NGOs around the world report. Why should 80 cents of a dollar go for administrative cost? So basically, you're talking about only 20 cents goes to help the people that need this money. And that has to change. I remember some years back, when Haiti went through with the earthquake, with the Clinton Foundation and other organizations, all that money that was donated to help the Haitian people. Go and look at Haiti today. It looks like none of that money even went there. Because coming to find out, a lot of the money that was donated, that was supposed to use to help rebuild Haiti, went into administrative cost. Administrative cost. For what? And we're talking about people who need money to help build and develop their countries and their situation. You have about 80 cents to a dollar going to administrative costs. What sense does that make? So at the end of the day, yes, America is going to be there. America is going to be there for the United Nations and the rest of the world in helping curb poverty and global health situation and so on and so forth. But America also has to make sure that the taxpayers of the United States of America's money are going into the right causes that goes to benefit the vulnerable citizens of these various countries. America cannot continue spending billions and billions of dollars that in some cases are taken by corrupt governments all over the world. Because most of this aid that America sends to all over these countries, all over the world, some of them end up in the corrupt government's pockets. And these are facts. So the question is, how do we do to curb these things, to make sure that this money doesn't end up in this corrupt government and crony capitalists who live in these countries' pockets? And that is what I think all this is all about. So the US government now is taking a look at all of these programs, and they are going to streamline them to make sure that every penny of America's taxpayers' money goes to do the right things and benefit the people that need this help from the United States taxpayers. They're not just going to keep dumping billions of dollars to agencies and then they decide where to spend the money and go through their crony capitalist, corrupt businesses and so on and so forth. It ain't happening anymore. And I think that's the right course for America to take. Because there's a lot of fraud and corruption in these organizations, these NGOs all around the world. Look, fellas, I just came across this, article in the, the Washington Times, where you have NIH, National Institute of Health, within the past 10 years, from 2011 to 2021, allocated over $2.1 billion US. And this $2.1 billion dollars was given to laboratories all across the globe. And they were doing research on animals. They used this money to do research on animals, which Peter and some even Democrats and Republicans had to come together and pass a bill, which they call the Cargo Act, to stop this U.S. money going outside of the United States to foreign countries to fund programs to do research on animals. They even have where millions of dollars are spent to find out the transgender of animals. Are you kidding me? I mean, I'm not joking, fellas. I mean, this is an article in the Washington Times. And you have a bill that is being sponsored by Eleanor Holmes Norton. She's a liberal Democrat in Washington, D.C. She's a co-sponsor of this bill. I mean, it's in right here. I mean, you can't make this up. This is coming from, the United States. This is coming from the United States. It says like, first spent millions on transgender animal experiments to study transition effects of animals. That is what we are talking about. It's right there. Are you kidding me? I mean, millions of dollars spent to study the effects of transition of transgender of animals. That is where American taxpayer money goes to. And this is the problem right there. Why do we have to spend millions of dollars to study transgender of animals? I mean, America has too much money. That is the problem. It has too much money that is allocated for these programs that in some cases doesn't even make sense. And it's been going on for too long, for far too long. Because at the end of the day, most of these congressmen and senators, all of them have these pet programs in their various states and communities and so on and so forth. So everybody wants to protect their projects. And this is where all these monies go. But now, the new sheriff in town is saying that, hold on, we are coming with a new strategy now. Now we're going to look at all these programs, all this money, and then we're going to decide which programs that goes to benefit vulnerable people that needs these programs most. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, he also ended up talking about the trade imbalances. I mean, talking about the tariffs that Donald Trump has imposed on, he tried to impose on Mexico and Canada and so on. Look, fellas, a lot of these things that Trump 2.0 is trying to do, a lot of people are blaming Trump. I mean, criticizing Trump. Why is it? But if you go into details of some of these things that have been going on for years, Trump is right on a lot of these issues. And even the Democrats agree on it. But it's the approach to it. That is what the problem is now. Because at the end of the day, you look at the trade imbalances between Canada, Mexico, China, and America. China, Mexico, and Canada trade imbalance against America is about 1.5, 1.6 trillion US dollars. I'm talking about trillion with a T, US dollars. How much trade does America does that goes to these three countries? About $200 billion. So you're talking about 1.5, 1.6 trillion dollars and $200 billion. So at the end of the day, that is why Trump's tariffs and his talk about tariffs on Europe and Latin America and the rest of the world is reverberating all across the globe. Because America has become the dumping ground, economic dumping ground of most countries all around the world. This is where they bring their goods and sell their products, and they make money way off of American citizens. And that's a fact. This is where the money is. So China brings in a lot of goods, over 600 billion US dollars. The recent data that came out 2024, over 600 billion dollars of Chinese goods that come into America every year. How much does America send to China? 150 something billion dollars. Canada, about 500 something billion dollars. Mexico, about almost 500 something billion dollars too. So at the end of the day, you're looking at all of these things, and Donald Trump is saying, hold on, we got to work something out to make sure that this trading is fair to both parties. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. But unfortunately, there are a lot of people who see Trump because of his blaster, the way he does things, the way he talks about things, especially looking at his immigration policy and so on. And then they blame Trump as if like what Trump is doing is not good for America. But I strongly believe that if you really believe in fair trade, then you don't have to be angry with Trump. Because at the end of the day, it had never been fair with countries trading with the United States of America. And the facts are there. Like I just stated, 1.2% and 1.4% of US goods go to Canada and Mexico. 1.2 and 1.4% goes to Canada and Mexico. Meanwhile, Mexico sends about 25 and Canada sends about 25 also percent of their goods to the United States of America. So look at the trade differences. So no wonder when Trump threatened the tariffs, these countries, what did they do? They decided to, huddle up and make a deal to make sure that tariffs doesn't take place. Because at the end of the day, America's economy is an inward economy. America's economy is great because it's an inward economy. America's economy is so powerful. It doesn't really rely that much on exports. That is why if you look around the world, almost every country export their goods to the United States and make money off of the United States. America doesn't export that much compared to the rest of the world goods that come into the United States of America. So that is why America's economy is so great, because it's able to withstand all economic shockwaves around the world because of its inward economic system and its economic policies as well. Lower deregulation and a lot of money coming from various parts of the world because of its economic policies. So, fellas, looking at everything that Marco Rubio just said, talking about from tariffs, from Panama Canal, and all that stuff that is going on right now. Yes, I understand the reverberations that a lot of countries are having in their capital cities, what they have to do with regards to if indeed this Donald Trump policy with regards to scaling back America's involvement in United Nations contributions, World Health Program, AIDS programs, and so on and so forth. How much impact this is going to have on the rest of the world? It's huge. It's going to be huge. It's going to be huge. And if you heard what Marco Rubio said, if China wants to step in, China has 1.5 billion people to feed, fellas. China don't have that much money to step in. And even if they are, they're not going to step in. When was that? How much does China contribute to United Nations programs? When I hear people sitting in Africa talking about what China is doing in Africa, all China is doing in Africa is giving you guys loans. But what America does is give money, donate money as a donor, not loans, through World Health Organization, United Nations programs, and USA. That's what America does. It's pretty much free money. That's what America does. That's the difference. China has 1.5 billion people to feed. And it doesn't have that much money to do what the United States of America has been doing for over 80 years in the world. China don't have that much money. And even if they do, they're not going to do it. Because it's not in them to do that. But it's in the United States' interest and its humane way to do that, and have been doing that all over these years for the rest of the world. So, the issue of whether if African countries are now going to get these programs that come to support the AIDS situation in South Africa and other parts of Africa. Water problems, electrical problems, and all these infrastructure problems that Africans go through. Social amenity problems. At the end of the day, like he also said, America is not going to continue to contribute money to countries that are hostile to the United States of America. And they are not going to continue doing it. Because if America is going to continue to contribute money to these programs to benefit these countries, then they don't expect these countries to go to the United Nations and vote against the interest of the United States of America. And fellas, look, to be frank with you guys, this new world realignment that Donald Trump is putting in place in the United States, that is reverberating all across the globe, is not going to change anytime soon. So if countries around the world are going to wait it out, thinking that maybe in the next 4 years or 8 years, a Democrat president will come in and make a U-turn. It ain't happening. Donald Trump has realigned the economic domestic foreign policy of the United States of America, and it's going to stay like this for a long time, fellas. Trust me. Because look, 2028, J.D. Vance, 9 out of 10, was going to succeed Donald Trump and become president. The Democrats are going to be in the wilderness for a long time. And they also understand the politics of what Donald Trump is doing. And even if a Democratic president comes in, let's say 2032, he's not going to scale back, because these things that this Donald Trump is doing right now, he's going to open the books and he's going to show it to the Americans. And Americans are seeing it. They've already started doing it. So even politically, the Democrats can challenge him, but only on some areas. By the end of the day, everybody agrees that yes, there are some fraud and some corruption in these programs, and they need to tailor them down and find a solution and streamline them and make sure they work for the people that needs them most. Everybody agrees on that. It's just the way Donald Trump is doing it. That's what the criticism is coming from the Democrats about. By the end of the day, everybody agrees that there's a fraud and corruption in some of these US aid programs. So if these countries around the world think that, let's say 2032, there's a Democrat that comes into office, is going to scale back and change everything, I'm sorry. By that time, the real alignment of America's foreign policy by Donald Trump has already taken effect. And American citizens have already become accustomed to that. So they're not going to go back to their old ways of doing business as usual. It will be gone. But the good thing about this thing that is going on right now also is that it's about time. It's about time for world economies also to come to the realization that they cannot keep sitting down there in their various countries, always hoping that the United States of America and Europe and Japan, as donor countries, to contribute to their own socioeconomic development. It's about time they come to realize that. This has been going on for over 60 years. I mean, come on, fellas. I mean, talk about African countries. Over 60 years of independence. I mean, you talk about independence. That's what you are calling yourself. Independent African countries, fellas. And you're still sitting down in this modern era, waiting for these countries to come and contribute money to help you in your socioeconomic development. And Donald Trump is saying that, look, we're not going to be doing this anymore. So now this is a good thing for African governments to come to the realization that, look, we have to now streamline our own economies, build our own countries to make sure that we spend money where it's supposed to be spent to benefit our citizens. We cannot keep always going around the world begging, asking for help as beggars from China, from Europe, from America, from Japan, and so on and so forth. And not just Africa, to other poorer countries too in the world. It's about time. Because the saddest truth about this is that, fellows, you go to some of these poor countries and you look at the way their governments spend money stupidly on unnecessary stuff like vehicles for themselves and their crony capitalist businessmen and so on. And you ask yourself, these are the so-called poor countries. And you go there, whenever they have change of government in some of these countries, the government has to import brand new Toyota Land Cruiser and all these SUVs for their new ministers and cabinet ministers and members of parliament and so on. Instead of them using that money to invest in the socioeconomic development of their various countries, they live lavishly whilst majority of their citizens go hungry and poor, lack of water, lack of electricity, lack of basic human amenities. Meanwhile, their elites and their political class living lavishly at the expense of their vulnerable citizens. And this is what is happening all across Africa. And then you sit down there and expect the taxpayers of the United States of America to come and fund that your stupid lavish lifestyle. It ain't happening. Donald Trump says it's not going to happen. Now it's up to your citizens to hold you, these African countries, responsible and accountable. It's that simple. I just came across an article by a Nigerian newspaper or so, talking about the Nigerian government right now is looking at ways and means to deal with the repercussions of what Trump is talking about in terms of US aid and all these programs and the money that they get. It's about time. Look at it. I mean, you're spending millions and millions of dollars buying new vehicles for yourself and your government ministers and members of parliament and so on and so forth. It's about time you look at your programs. And I hope their citizens also hold them accountable for it. Because at the end of the day, if you look at every country, especially African countries, the wealth that exists under our feet in Africa, the mineral resources, the natural resources. I mean, Africa don't have to go to the world begging for aid. Africa has everything under their feet. But because of corrupt bad governance, that is why Africa is where it is. I mean, just last week, Dangote Oil Refinery is exporting jet fuel to Saudi Arabia, to London, Heathrow Airport, to Singapore. It's exporting. I mean, this is a country that was importing just a year ago. Now, with the coming of Dangote Oil Refinery, now Dangote Oil Refinery is exporting jet fuel to Saudi Arabia, Singapore, London, and so on and so forth. That tells you what Africa is capable of. This tells you what Africa is capable of. Dangote have proven that Africa can be self-reliant and do things to benefit Africans. But because of bad governance, corrupt leadership, that is why Africa is where it is today. All these natural resources, they're still sitting down there, waiting for America, Europe, Japan, and China to come and give them aid. And then they use this aid even not to help to benefit their own citizens. They steal some of their aid money too. That is the unfortunate truth. They even steal some of the aid money. So the aid money doesn't even go to benefit their citizens. They keep it in their pocket with their phony NGO organizations that they have established in their various African countries. And now Donald Trump is saying, fellas, it ain't happening anymore. It ain't happening anymore. But it's up to you, the citizens of Africa, to hold your politicians and your governments accountable. Because other than that, you're going to be sitting down there always screaming and always getting poorer and poorer and poorer because you have the resources to be better than where you are today. Africa should never be where it is today. Looking at the level of resources that we have, we also have to look inwardly. Develop our systems within what we have locally and stop relying on imported goods. See, that is our problem. We have abandoned what we have by always looking up to what we can import from Europe, Asia, and America. And that is our problem. If we are able to stop that and rely on what we have locally and make use of what we have locally, I think Africa will be better off because we have everything down there. You know, but if you keep relying on importing goods, I mean, always rely on the dollar, unfortunately, this is how it's going to be. The citizens of Africa are always going to be poor and poor and poor and poor and poor. I mean, look at what is going on with Rwanda and DRC right now. Civil war, fighting over a mineral resource area in DRC. We're fighting among ourselves over a natural resource. We cannot even unite to help to make use of these mineral resources to benefit our citizens. But greedy politicians, corrupt crony capitalists in our various African countries, this is what they have come to live off. They've lived off of the corrupt money to the extent they can never let go. So every time, this is what they have to do. They create instability. You go to Nigeria, all this instability that exists in Nigeria, and you have corrupt government officials conniving with some of these so-called terrorists down there to steal the natural resources that exist in these countries. It is unfortunate. It is unfortunate. I mean, look, this new world order that Donald Trump is talking about, that Marco Rubio just said, is here to stay. Nothing is going to change. America is not going to change from this new world order. This is how it's going to be even when Trump leaves office in 2028. This is how it is going to be. And no Democratic president is going to come and dial it backwards anymore. It ain't happening anymore. Because they're going to make Americans aware of the level of corruption that exists and have existed in these US aid and other federal agencies. And out of that, politically, no president, whether Democrat or Republican, is going to come into office and dial this thing back. I'm sorry, fellas. I'm sorry. You know, you have news media in Nigeria, Arise News, that always sits down there and talk about what Trump is doing in America. I mean, give me a break, Arise News. Look at what is going on in Nigeria. Look at the bad government that exists and talk about it. And stop worrying about what Trump is doing in America. Because at the end of the day, Trump is representing the taxpayers of the United States of America. And that is what he's doing. So you sitting down in Nigeria, Lagos, worrying about Trump. I mean, I get it. I understand America is the world and the world is America. I get it. Every country basically looks up to America and all that. But at the end of the day, use that energy and call out the bad governance that exists in Nigeria. And stop worrying about Donald Trump. Okay? Call out the bad governance, the corrupt government that exists in your country that has created all that level of poverty. Like I just said, Dangote Oil Refinery started exporting jet fuel to Saudi Arabia. What an achievement. Just a few months ago last year, they were doing everything possible to destroy Dangote Refinery, to make it impossible for him to operate. And this man now is exporting jet fuel to the biggest oil exporter in the world, Saudi Arabia. That tells you what Nigeria is capable of doing. If you have a good governance, that tells you exactly what Nigeria is capable of doing. Where you can attract foreign investors, private foreign investors, to come into Nigeria and invest in Nigeria. Because Dangote has proven it. Dangote has proven it. And that tells you the importance of direct private foreign investment into our various African countries. So this is what these news organizations in Africa, this is what you have to be talking about. Talk about the things that are going on that is bad in government in Africa. And instead of you worrying about Donald Trump, what he's doing in America. I mean, give me a break. All right, fellas. So if it's Sunday, it's the Africa Weekly Talk. God bless you guys and have a great week. Thank you guys and peace and love.